She hardly had to do anything at all. Matthew took care of everything himself. That's why no one was surprised or objected when the abbess of the Ramsey monastery decided to take a solitary stroll through the garden at dusk. Everything happened so quickly that she didn't have time to feel scared or think about retreating. After all, no one was forcing her to take this step. On the contrary, she had expressed her own willingness to leave the holy walls. Maria of Boulogne, the daughter of King Stephen of England, had hated them for many years. She was born in February of 1136, just as her father ascended to the throne. As the third daughter of the king, she could have made a good match, but a different fate was prepared for her. Her mother and father decided that one of their daughters should become a nun. In large medieval families, one or two offspring were always sent to the monastery. The times were harsh, too. King Stephen's authority was far from absolute. He constantly had to fend off attacks, from the Scots in the north to rivals for the throne. Queen Matilda, the princess's mother, was herself fighting for power on behalf of her husband. When Stephen was captured, it was Matilda's efforts that secured his release. The English queen showed remarkable composure and resourcefulness in that dire situation, managing to gather supporters around her. Of course, the king and queen had little time for their children. While their eldest son and heir could still expect some attention, the others had to make do with scraps of parental love. The younger ones were handed over to nurses for upbringing, so much so that Maria once forgot what her mother looked like. When the queen returned from yet another long trip across the country and approached the little girl, Maria burst into tears. As soon as the princess turned 14, plans for her future began to take shape. She was brought to the Ramsey monastery. By that time, only 3 of the royal couple's children were still alive. The heir, Eustace, Maria herself, and the youngest, William, named after their great-grandfather the Conqueror. Maria disliked life in the monastery from day one. But what could she say? What could she do? Pleading with her parents for mercy was pointless. Furthermore, when her older brother passed away 2 years later, King Stephen lost all interest in life and became completely withdrawn. If she wrote to her father, her letters went unanswered. Soon after, the king himself died. She could have resigned herself to her fate, like hundreds of noble girls before her. But everything changed dramatically when her younger brother died. Suddenly, she became the heiress to vast lands in France, the county of Boulogne, and the territories of the House of Blois. Maria was incredibly wealthy, yet she wore a nun's habit. It was a glaring injustice. Then someone stepped in to help her, Matthew, the son of the Count of Alsace. A young and ambitious warrior, he connected with the princess through intermediaries. It turned out to be easier than expected. Matthew proposed that the daughter of the English king escape from the monastery. He would handle all the preparations. All she had to do was agree. And Maria agreed. On a December night in the year 1159, the princess was abducted from the monastery. Having never seen Matthew, Maria fell in love with him instantly. How could she not love her savior? They married a year later, and there was no happier princess than Maria of Boulogne. As for the fact that she transferred her rights to the county to her husband, what did that matter? She was grateful to him for her freedom, for saving her young life. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a happy union. Matthew adored his wife, and she became a mother twice, first to a daughter named Ida, and then to another daughter, Matilda. However, the happiness of some always breeds resentment in others. Matthew of Alsace's enemies complained to the church about his thoughtless act. The Archbishop of Reims demanded that the count return his wife to the monastery. When he received a firm refusal, the priest became enraged. Even Matthew's own father turned against him, urging his son to abandon his wife, fearing that the priest's wrath could lead to greater misfortunes. But once again, the count brushed aside the threats. However, an interdict was placed on Boulogne. This meant excommunication from the church, leading to the closure of all churches in the county. It became impossible to pray, baptize, marry, or receive absolution for sins. The people grew restless, and Matthew's barons were furious. A rebellion could easily ignite. Maria was the first to urge Matthew to renounce her. She pleaded with her husband to listen to the priest and even sent a request to the archbishop to find her a suitable monastery. From the church's perspective, the princess had violated sacred law. After all, a nun could not marry. At one time, Maria and Matthew had believed they could navigate the strict rules, but it turned out to be impossible. Ultimately, Matthew and Maria's marriage was annulled. The heartfelt plea from the count and countess to retain their children's rights as heirs of Boulogne was granted. Embracing her daughters one last time, Maria departed for the monastery of Saint Ostrobertha in Montreuil. Within the walls of the convent, the former Countess of Boulogne lived for another 12 years. She never got to see her eldest daughter, but at least her younger daughter, Matilda, visited her mother in the monastery once. Matthew of Alsace died 4 years after being separated from his beloved wife. After their separation, he focused solely on war and met his end from a crossbow bolt during the siege of Drincourt.